the inverse of that. I did an engagement where we left a leave behind device. We got in, did what we had to do, and left. But before we could retrieve the leave behind device, security found it.
Oh.
And this is where it got messy. This led to a series of events where we found out that the guy who engaged us to test this facility didn't tell any of the people he told engaged us to test this facility. People got mad. This led to this whole internal dumpster fire where, like, we just spent days sitting around in a hotel room in a holding pattern, figuring out if if the project is still going. Like as an internal red teamer, normally you just assume that like the stakeholder who engages you actually had, like, as a consultant, I would always do OS and verify that like we had authority to test this and
Yep.
like do our due diligence there. But like as an internal red teamer, you assume that like if a manager says, "Hey, can you test this for us?" you assume that they actually have the authority.
Right. Yeah.
And like we actually told him, like, hey, I asked him in the kickoff call, I'm like, is there any internal approval you need or anything like that? He's like, nope. I'm like, oh, so you lied to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like they didn't catch us, but like they found the leave behind device, and that got.
Then it became a escalation with everything. They're like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, we're being hacked by the APT.
So what got interesting is like because we were doing night entry, we informed local police that we were doing this just for safety, because like we didn't want to get chased by dogs in the night or
Yep.
anything.
Yep.
And the guy at local PD we contacted, he's like, okay, I'll put in a prim hazard, like a note in their system. He forgot to do that.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So then like they called police, like the facility called the cops, and like they took the leave behind device was a camera.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, well, the police are like, sorry, it was on your, like, it was technically on the easement on your property, so we're not going to do anything. So then they said the cops, well, we don't want it. He's like, the cops are like, fine, we'll destroy it. And I lost hidden camera
Oh
that
man.
way.
Oh man.
Well,
was it a good one at least?
No.
Oh, okay.
Probably
okay.
why I got caught.
All right. Well, yeah. I mean, so that brings up a few questions actually. That story, which I really like. Do you prefer nighttime or daytime entry?
It depends. If it's a facility where I think, like, if it's a facility somewhere where I have to worry about armed guards, or like, if there's any sort of like added physical risk to night entry, I'll try and avoid it, just because there are no respawns in real life.
Right. Yeah.
So like, but if the threat model fits night entry, I think it's doable, I prefer it.
Okay.
But more often than not, it's easier to go in during the day.
Yeah, I love day entry myself, right? Because employees are supposed to be there at that time,
Yeah.
right? And you are looking like a regular employee.
Yeah.
Hopefully you're looking like a regular employee.
Or at least someone who's supposed to be there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. As red teamers, we're not supposed to wear, airsoft vests when we're making entry.
I know who you're talking about.
I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying that, you don't wear tactical vests when you're trying to go and make entry.
Yeah.
Also, hopping a fence, I guess, is a valid attack vector, but, not something that you have to do every single day.
Yeah.
But it you just look like a regular employee. You're there.
Yeah.
If it's a much nicer company, they cater lunch, right? Yeah.
But generally I agree. But, there are some facilities and some objectives.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like, especially if you're talking about things like, cargo theft, like warehouse burglary, like I was talking about earlier.
Yep.
Like, it's a lot harder to do that during the day.
Mm-hmm.
And also, if you look at actual crime stats, most break-ins happen when the facility is not occupied.
Yeah, and well, now I'm not saying don't do night entry.
Yeah, no,
I'm saying my preference is daytime.
Yeah.
Right. Every project, usually you have a day component and a night component.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but my first time making entry, I want to try to do it during the middle of the day.
Yeah, and I'm never going to do nighttime entry unless if I scoped it out during the day.
Right, yeah, you have to do your surveillance, right? You have to
Yeah.
do all that stuff.
Like-
And even daytime entry, we have to do our surveillance, right?
Yeah.
So,
And something I think is also essential is before you go on site, you for surveillance, you need to do an OSINT workup.
Oh yeah,
And
100%.
I don't think OSINT should replace physical surveillance. I think OSINT should inform physical surveillance. When you're doing OSINT, you want to create a list of questions you want answered by on-site recon.
Mm-hmm.
Like you want to say like, hey, from social media posts and satellite imagery, I think there's this entry point and this on the perimeter. You need to verify that when you show up on site.
Yeah, so like we say in our classes, right? The passive surveillance is used. You do passive surveillance in the beginning, which is like OSN, right, and stuff like that. And then you validate that when you're doing your active surveillance, right? So it always becomes the first time you see the facility should not be the first time you're actually looking at it, right?
Yeah.
You should have a general good lay of the land. You should know what restaurants are around, right?
Yeah.
You should know because you might interface with people, especially during daytime entry.
Yeah.
And you might be working with.
You want to know who their internet provider is,
right? Or someone might ask you a question about like the local area, right?
Yeah.
It's just like I remember I got asked a question. I was in a state that was like transitioning to no bags at grocery stores.
Yeah.
And someone asked me, hey, do you know if this grocery store uses bags? Like, do they still give out bags for free?
Yeah.
And my answer could have been like, oh, I don't shop there and blah, blah, blah. And luckily the night before I actually went there, but I knew that was the grocery store, right? They didn't say like this grocery store. They said, hey, do you know if Fry's still gives out bags?
Yeah.
And if you're just a nerd, you're like, Fry's Electronics. That hasn't been around for years, right? So you're just like, what are you talking about? There's a Fry's here, and now it's just like, yeah, you don't fit in around here, do you? It's just like, but now it's just like, yeah, they did. I went there last night, right? And even without knowing that, you can just say like, you don't have to be confused. You don't have to have that moment of like embarrassing yourself by just looking up the local store and stuff like that.
Yeah, I did one engagement where there was a cemetery near the target facility.
Oh.
So like we wanted to do CTR, like pull in to the parking lot, like past the gate and like see what was there. Because this was a very hard facility to case. Because like it was literally just on the side of a highway and like, there was nowhere we could stake out. So like one of my coworkers drove in with a hidden camera and like drove around trying to like made it look like they were lost and trying to turn around. And their pretext was if they got stopped, they would say, and they had flowers like on the dash. And the pretext was, I'm here to pay respects to someone who died recently. Can you, show me where the cemetery is? And we actually went to the website for the cemetery, found someone who was buried there.
Yep.
And like was buried at a date close enough to when we were doing this where it would make sense that someone would show up to pay respects. And like we did OSINT on the person who died to come up with like things about them if in case it ever got that far.
Yep.
Like there's this in the movie Argo, there's this great scene where one of the people they have to smuggle out says, do you really think your funny cover story is going to hold up when there's a gun to my head? And he responds, my funny looking cover story is the only thing that's going to keep a gun from your head.
Right. Yeah.
Like you need your pretext to speak for you. Like you want, your persona, your props to sell your pretext to the point where like people don't feel the need to ask you any questions. Like the best pretexts are the ones that make it where you don't even have to talk to anyone.
Yeah, you belong. Right.
Thank you for tuning in to Red Team Radio. Don't forget to like this episode, hit subscribe, and follow for more. Craving extra Red Team Radio exclusives? Dive deeper at redteamradio.net and click support for early episode releases and members-only content. Join us twice a month as we continue to unveil the unseen in the Red Team Chronicles. Remain vigilant and do not cease to be curious.